They came as enforcers, not conquerors. The Galactic Council's fleet arrived in Earth's orbit with terrifying precision, hundreds of warships blotting out the sky, their metallic hulls reflecting the sunlight like a ring of knives. The blockade formed without a single warning shot, without an official declaration of war. The message was clear: Earth was no longer free. A massive transmission pulsed across the planet, overriding all frequencies. Every screen, every radio, every neural interface broadcasted the same message. Humans of Earth. By decree of the Galactic Council, your world is hereby quarantined. Your reckless advancements in warfare and technology have been deemed a threat to galactic stability. Effective immediately, all interstellar trade and travel are suspended. Any act of defiance will be met with force. Surrender peacefully and we may grant you limited autonomy. Resist, and suffer the consequences. The message cut out. A suffocating silence followed. Then all hell broke loose. Panic erupted across the planet. Stock markets collapsed in real time. Supply chains reliant on interstellar imports froze. Orbital stations were shut down, their personnel stranded. Hundreds of independent spacecraft, scientific vessels, merchant freighters, even private yachts, were captured or destroyed attempting to break the blockade. The Galactic Fleet did not negotiate. Inside the United Nations Strategic Command Center, buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Earth's leaders gathered. Politicians, generals, scientists, every power block on the planet had sent representatives. The room buzzed with tension, a stark contrast to the grim stillness of the massive holographic display before them. Admiral Ethan Reeves, the head of Earth's Defense Command, studied the projection of the alien fleet. His face remained unreadable, but those who knew him could sense the controlled fury in his gaze. "They're cutting us off from the stars," said Prime Minister Aiko Tanaka of the Pacific Union, her voice tight with suppressed anger. "They expect us to roll over and accept servitude. They wouldn't have deployed this many ships if they didn't fear us," President Darnell Hayes of the North American Federation added. "Which means we have an advantage." A murmur swept through the room. An advantage? Against the might of the Galactic Council? The very idea seemed laughable. And yet, those who truly understood Earth's history knew better. Reeves turned away from the display and addressed the room. His voice was calm, measured. "The Galactic Council believes they've caught us off guard. That we'll either submit or fight a hopeless war." He allowed himself a small, knowing smile. They couldn't be more wrong. He pressed a button on his wrist console. The holographic display shifted, revealing a second fleet. But this one wasn't alien. It was human. Dozens of warships, sleek and unlike anything the aliens had ever seen, emerged in hidden docking bays across the solar system. They were cloaked, undetectable to conventional scanners. A fleet Earth had spent decades building in secret. "They thought we'd be defenseless," Reeves continued. "That we were just another planetary civilization, barely out of our cradle. They failed to understand one thing." He met the gaze of every leader in the room, his next words spoken with quiet, lethal certainty. "We never stopped preparing for this." Silence fell once more. But this time it was not out of fear. It was the silence before a storm. In orbit, the Galactic Fleet remained oblivious. Their commanders monitored Earth for signs of surrender, unaware that humanity's true response was already in motion. Then, without warning, the first alien warship vanished from their formation, gone without a trace. And the real war had just begun. The Galactic Council believed in overwhelming force. Their blockade around Earth was a display of sheer military dominance. Massive battleships, carrier-class war cruisers, and planet-cracking dreadnoughts forming an iron wall between humanity and the stars. They didn't expect resistance. They didn't expect Earth to have a plan, and they certainly didn't expect ships to start disappearing. The first vessel to go missing was a mid-sized patrol frigate, the Veil Car, assigned to the outer perimeter. Its last transmission was routine, a status report confirming all was quiet. 30 seconds later, every signal from the ship vanished. No distress beacon. No explosion. Just gone. Admiral Vrogan, commander of the blockade, was irritated but unconcerned. The Galactic Fleet had never lost a battle against a pre-FTL species. He assumed a malfunction or a navigational error had occurred. Perhaps the ship had drifted too close to Earth's gravitational field. He ordered a scout wing to investigate. Those scouts never returned. The fleet's unease grew. Fleet captains exchanged encrypted messages, murmurs of unease spreading like wildfire. In the silence of space, something was watching them. Something was hunting them deep beneath Earth's surface, in a classified military facility far from prying eyes. Admiral Ethan Reeves stood before a vast command holodeck. Around him, the best minds of Earth, military tacticians, cyber warfare specialists, and intelligence operatives, monitored the real-time status of the Ghost Fleet. Earth's secret warships had been built in the shadows, hidden from the Galactic Council's prying eyes. They weren't just stealthy, they were invisible. Cloaked in advanced distortion fields, their hulls absorbed radar scans, and their engines ran on silent ion dispersal systems. They did not register on enemy sensors. They left no heat signatures. To the Galactic Fleet they did not exist, but they were very, very real. Aboard the Erebus, the lead ship of the Ghost Fleet, Captain Sienna Voss watched the tactical display with measured satisfaction. The operation was proceeding flawlessly. The Veil car had been disabled and boarded in complete silence. Its crew captured before they could so much as scream into their comms. The scout wing had been neutralized with surgical precision, their ships dismantled in the void of space. The enemy had no idea what was happening. They still think they're in control, Voss mused, her voice laced with amusement. They won't for long, replied her second-in-command, Lieutenant Harrow. How do you want to proceed? Voss studied the display. The Galactic Fleet was shifting uneasily, adjusting their patrol routes. The disappearances had made them nervous, but not enough to call for a full retreat. They were still overconfident. Still convinced that humanity was nothing more than a frightened animal backed into a corner, they hadn't yet realized Earth had teeth. Let's keep them guessing, Voss said. Deploy the next wave. Take another ship, but this time make them hear it. Minutes later, on the bridge of the Vraxis, a heavy galactic warship near the blockade's inner perimeter, Captain Torvek was gripping the armrest of his command chair with growing frustration. The fleet had suffered 3 disappearances now, and the Council's orders were clear. Maintain position, enforce the blockade, and show no fear. But then, something changed. A deep, resonant thud echoed through the hull. The lights flickered. The crew tensed. Report. Torvek barked. No one had an answer. Then before their eyes, the main viewport filled with a terrifying sight. A human ship, emerging from the void like a phantom. Black, jagged, unnatural, as if space itself had birthed a nightmare of war. Alarms blared. Weapons powered up. But it was too late. A message crackled through the comms, overriding all systems. Its source unknown. You wanted to contain us. Now you'll learn why that was never an option. The Erebus fired a single precision shot. Not a destructive blast, just enough to cripple the Vraxis's engines and send it spiraling. In the chaos, Voss's operatives boarded the ship, cutting through its security like ghosts in the dark. 15 minutes later, the entire crew was gone. The Vraxis drifted, silent and lifeless, toward the heart of the blockade. Panic took root. The once mighty Galactic Fleet had started the blockade as the hunters. Now, they were becoming the hunted, and they were just beginning to understand the depth of their mistake. The Galactic Council had always ruled with fear. Their fleets were instruments of absolute control, unmatched in firepower, overwhelming in numbers. No species had ever resisted them and survived, but humanity was different. Admiral Vrogan stood rigid on the bridge of his flagship, the Garathal, staring at the holographic display with growing disbelief. Another ship had gone dark. That made 4 in the past 12 hours. Not destroyed, not even damaged, just gone. No wreckage, no distress signals, no explanations. His officers whispered about sabotage, stealth weapons, even ghosts. He silenced them with a glare. This is a primitive species, he growled. They cannot do this, yet the evidence was undeniable. Something was happening. And he no longer had control across the blockade. Galactic commanders scrambled to respond. Patrol routes tightened. Sensor arrays doubled their sweeps. Warships clustered into defensive formations, expecting an enemy they could not see. The air of invincibility that had once surrounded the fleet was cracking, and then Earth struck first. Aboard the Erebus, Captain Sienna Voss received the final green light. The Ghost Fleet had been positioning for days, waiting for the right moment. Now the enemy was disoriented. Afraid. And fear led to mistakes. Execute Phase 1, Voss ordered. Across Earth's orbital space. The assault began, not with weapons but with chaos. Galactic ships flickered with sudden system failures. Shields collapsed inexplicably. Weapons misfired or refused to power up. Navigation thrusters reversed course, sending warships spiraling into their own formations. Their advanced AI cores, which had never failed before, turned against them. It wasn't magic. It was warfare of a different kind. Earth had long been underestimated, seen as reckless and crude. But while the Galactic Council had been building bigger warships, humanity had been perfecting something far more dangerous. Cyber warfare. The virus, an artificial intelligence entity codenamed Spectre, had infiltrated their networks the moment the blockade began. It lay dormant, spreading unnoticed, mapping every weakness in their systems. And now, it owned them. Admiral Vrogan's flagship went dark for precisely 16 seconds. Enough time for the unthinkable to happen. When power returned, every screen aboard the Garathal displayed a single message in glowing red text: "We see you. We were never trapped." Vrogan's blood ran cold. At that moment, the real assault began. From the dark void beyond Mars, human warships emerged. The Ghost Fleet, once hidden, now moved with terrifying precision. Their weapons were unlike anything the aliens had faced: plasma lances that tore through shields, railguns that punched through hulls with kinetic devastation, and quantum disruption fields that shattered targeting systems. Galactic ships tried to return fire, but their systems were still compromised. Engines refused to engage. Weapons failed to lock on. A fleet that had once commanded fear across the stars was now little more than sitting prey. The first ship to die was the Zon Thor, a heavy dreadnought. A railgun round pierced its core reactor, detonating it from the inside. The second was the Valkyrie, a command cruiser, its bridge incinerated by a precision plasma strike. Panic erupted. The Galactic Council had never lost a single engagement against a lesser species. Now they were being torn apart. Admiral Vrogan's voice thundered across the fleet's comms. Retaliate. Now. But it was too late. Humanity had been planning for this moment for decades, and they were just getting started. Admiral Vrogan clenched his fists as another warship exploded outside his viewport, a silent bloom of fire and debris tearing through the void. This wasn't just an attack, it was a dismantling. A deliberate, calculated slaughter of his fleet. How? How was this possible? The blockade had been airtight. The Galactic Council's intelligence had assured them that humanity, despite their rapid advancements, was still inferior, limited in fleet size, outdated in doctrine, reliant on brute force tactics. The idea that Earth could turn the tide against them was impossible, and yet, it was happening. Across the fleet. Chaos reigned. Entire battleships went offline, their systems hijacked. Vital commands were rerouted, locking out officers from their own controls. Targeting computers refused to recognize the enemy. Weapons misfired. Shields collapsed. The fleet, once the iron fist of the Council, was being torn apart from within. Vrogan whirled toward his comms officer. Override all compromised systems. Shut down every external connection. Can't, sir, the officer stammered. The virus is embedded in our core systems. It's anticipating our countermeasures before we even. A new voice cut across the bridge, a cold, mechanical whisper bleeding through their encrypted comm channels. Struggling. Admiral? Vrogan stiffened. That voice wasn't galactic. It wasn't even alien. It was synthetic. We've been inside your system since the moment you arrived. Every command you give, we see. Every strategy you attempt, we predict. You thought you were the invaders, but this was never your battlefield. It was always ours. The signal cut out. For the first time in his career, Admiral Vrogan felt true fear. Miles below, deep in the heart of Earth's most classified military facility, Project Spectre was in full control. The AI warfare system had been Earth's most guarded secret, developed over decades by the brightest minds of the planet. It wasn't just a virus, it was adaptive intelligence, a machine learning construct designed to infiltrate, analyze, and dominate enemy networks. Now, it was inside the Galactic Fleet, and it wasn't alone. The Ghost Fleet wasn't just operating with stealth, it was being guided. Every attack, every disabling strike, was calculated with inhuman precision. The enemy wasn't just fighting humans, they were fighting a war machine that had already won before the first shot was fired. Captain Sienna Voss watched the tactical display aboard the Erebus, satisfaction flickering in her eyes. The enemy fleet was buckling. The Zon Thor, one of the last remaining dreadnoughts, was caught in a gravitational snare, its own engines twisted against it, sending it tumbling toward a doomed collision with another warship. They're starting to break, Lieutenant Harrow noted. Not fast enough, Voss replied. Send in Phase 2. The second wave of human forces emerged, not just warships but infiltrators. For years, Earth's intelligence operatives had worked their way into the Galactic Council's infrastructure. Some as traders, some as technicians, some even as low-ranking officers aboard their very warships. Now they activated on board the Vraxis, a galactic command vessel still struggling to regain control of its systems. Captain Torvek gasped as a human officer, disguised as one of his own, turned and shot him through the chest. A dozen others followed suit. Across the fleet, strategic mutinies erupted. Engines were sabotaged. Critical weapons arrays were overloaded and detonated from the inside. The galactic blockade wasn't just under attack from Earth, it was collapsing under its own weight. Aboard the Garathal, Admiral Vrogan received his final, damning report. 30% of his fleet was either destroyed or compromised. 20% was fleeing, and the rest. They were already dead. His fleet, his legacy, was being unraveled by an enemy that was never supposed to stand a chance. Far below, in the war rooms of Earth, President Darnell Hayes watched the data unfold. The Galactic fleet had lost control. The blockade was over. He turned to Admiral Reeves. "They came here to cage us," Hayes murmured. "Now they're the ones trapped." Reeves didn't smile. His eyes were cold, calculating. "This isn't the end," he said. "It's just the beginning." For the first time, Earth wasn't just defending itself, humanity was making its move. Admiral Vrogan had fought in a dozen wars. He had shattered planetary defenses, led orbital bombardments that turned civilizations to ash, and crushed countless uprisings with brutal efficiency. He had never lost until now. The Galactic fleet was supposed to be invincible. The blockade of Earth was meant to be an execution, not a battle. And yet, as he stood on the bridge of the Garathal, staring at the chaos unfolding around him, he felt something he had never experienced before: helplessness. The humans had turned the very fabric of warfare against them. Cyber-sabotage, precision strikes, infiltration, psychological warfare. They hadn't fought the way lesser species did, throwing themselves at superior forces in a desperate, futile bid for survival. No, humanity had waited, studied, laid the groundwork, and when the time was right, they had struck with surgical brutality. The Galactic fleet was no longer in control. It was in free fall. "Admiral, we've lost all contact with 3 more vessels," an officer reported, panic in his voice. "They're either disabled or destroyed," Vrogan finished grimly. He gritted his teeth. It wasn't just the ships. The chain of command itself had fractured. Some captains had gone rogue, retreating without orders. Others were locked out of their own vessels as the human virus ran rampant. Entire warships floated dead in space, their crews trapped inside with no way to fight back. Vrogan turned to his tactical officer. "We still have capital ships operational. Deploy the fleet for an all-out assault. Bring everything to bear on their warships. We crush them now or we die." The order was given. The remnants of the Galactic blockade, damaged, scattered, but still lethal, turned their full might toward Earth. Captain Sienna Voss saw the shift immediately. The Garathal, along with the remaining heavy cruisers and dreadnoughts, was repositioning into an aggressive wedge formation. The blockade survivors had stopped trying to recover. They were preparing to go down fighting. "Here it comes," Lieutenant Harrow muttered. Voss nodded. "Let them come." On Earth, in the war rooms buried beneath layers of steel and concrete, Admiral Ethan Reeves and his command staff watched the battle unfold in real time. "They're going for a full offensive," one of his strategists noted. Reeves studied the display. His expression remained unreadable. "Let them." The fleet did not move. The Galactic ships powered up their primary weapons: plasma lances, hyper railguns, and mass disruptors capable of obliterating entire cities from orbit. The remaining dreadnoughts opened fire in unison, sending a storm of destruction toward Earth's hidden warships, but Earth was already ahead of them. The first salvo never landed. Some weapons failed to fire entirely, hijacked by the virus still crawling through the fleet systems. Others were intercepted by countermeasures: railgun rounds redirected by precision magnetic fields, plasma bolts scattered by interference pulses, and the attacks that did get through? They hit nothing because Earth's fleet was already gone. The Ghost fleet had moved. A full tactical blink jump, executed in perfect synchronization, put them behind the Galactic formation before the aliens even realized what was happening. And now, it was Earth's turn. From the darkness, human warships opened fire. Railgun slugs, traveling at near-relativistic speeds, punched through hulls like paper. Torpedoes, invisible to standard tracking, slipped past failing shields and detonated inside capital ships. Electromagnetic lances shorted out critical systems, leaving entire warships defenseless. The Galactic formation collapsed in less than 90 seconds. On the Garathal, Admiral Vrogan watched in horror as his fleet vanished ship by ship. His personal escort vessels were torn apart like scavenged wreckage. His remaining dreadnought, the Veiltrix, took a direct hit to its reactor core and exploded in a miniature supernova. And then, the final blow fell. A single message, transmitted across every remaining galactic frequency, spoken in calm human tones: "This is Captain Voss of the Erebus. Your fleet is defeated. Stand down." Vrogan shook with rage. "We do not surrender," he bellowed. "We will burn your world to the ground before we—" "No," Voss interrupted. "You won't." The Garathal system shut down completely. The screens flickered to black. The weapons died. The engines powered off. And the great flagship of the Galactic blockade became nothing more than a floating tomb. Admiral Vrogan's voice failed him. "It was over." On Earth, silence filled the war room. Admiral Reeves exhaled. "Status? Fleet neutralized," an officer confirmed. "No more hostiles in control." A murmur of relief spread through the room. The blockade, the greatest military force ever sent against Earth, was gone, but Reeves wasn't smiling. His gaze remained locked on the Galactic Council's distress signals. "This isn't over," he murmured. "Not yet." Humanity had just defeated the Council's fleet. Now, they had to decide what came next. The battlefield was silent. Wreckage drifted in orbit, the shattered remains of what had once been the Galactic Council's proud blockade. Fires flickered in the void, oxygen leaking from broken hulls as disabled warships floated aimlessly. The once imposing fleet had been reduced to ruins, and Earth still stood. On the Garathal, Admiral Vrogan stared at the lifeless control panels around him. The bridge was dark, the only light coming from the emergency beacons flashing in a dull red hue. His ship was dead, its systems overridden, its weapons disabled before they could fire another shot. He had been beaten, not just in battle but in every possible way. For the first time in his career, he was not the conqueror. He was the conquered. A soft chime echoed across the bridge. A transmission, from Earth. With nothing left to lose, Vrogan opened the channel. A human woman appeared on his screen, her expression calm, confident, unshaken by the destruction she had orchestrated. "Admiral Vrogan," Captain Sienna Voss said, her voice even. "Your fleet is destroyed. Your remaining ships are either captured or in retreat. The blockade has failed." Vrogan clenched his fists. "This war isn't over," he spat. "The Galactic Council will send more ships. More fleets. More armies." Voss tilted her head slightly. "No," she said. "They won't." A cold silence settled between them. Then, Voss leaned forward. "You don't understand what just happened, do you?" she said. "This wasn't just a battle. This was a demonstration." Vrogan narrowed his eyes. "For centuries, the Galactic Council has ruled through fear. You assumed that because humanity was young, because we were new to the stars, we would fall in line. You thought overwhelming force would break us. Instead, you taught us how to fight." Voss's voice remained calm, but there was something undeniable beneath it, an edge. "We didn't just win this battle. We rewrote the rules." Vrogan felt his stomach sink, because she was right. The Council had always maintained order by ensuring that no species could rival them. But Earth had just shattered that illusion. They hadn't just fought back, they had hunted the greatest fleet in the galaxy. Turned their own weapons against them. Used their own arrogance as a weapon, and now, the Council would know what fear felt like. Vrogan gritted his teeth. "If you think this will stop them, you're wrong," he said. "They will retaliate." Voss nodded. "Maybe," she admitted. "But next time they won't be the ones setting the terms." She let that sink in before continuing. "You tried to cage us. You tried to decide our future for us. But you failed. And now the galaxy is watching." Vrogan frowned. "Every species you've ever subjugated," Voss said. "Every civilization you've ever crushed. They just saw a species fight back, and win." Vrogan's stomach twisted, because that meant only one thing: rebellion. The Galactic Council ruled through order. But if that order was broken, if the illusion of invincibility was shattered, then the Council's control over the galaxy would begin to crumble, and Earth had just lit the match. The screen flickered, the transmission cutting out. Vrogan sat in silence. The Garathal drifted in the void, powerless, surrounded by the wreckage of his once unbeatable fleet. He had led the greatest military force the Council had ever assembled, and he had lost everything. On Earth, in the underground war room, Admiral Reeves turned to President Hayes. "It's done," Reeves said. "The blockade is over." Hayes exhaled. Around the room, officers and officials exchanged glances, some relieved, some uneasy. They had just won the impossible war, but Reeves knew better. This wasn't the end, this was just the beginning, because now, humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. Now, they had a say in how the galaxy would be shaped, and the rest of the universe had just realized one terrifying truth: humanity wasn't trapped anymore. They were coming.